Here. All right, thank you, Einat. All right, let's get I gotta press got it. All right, let's get learning. Good morning. Great to see everyone this morning. Thanks for joining on. We're gonna jump right into it because the goal is to keep this sort of short and tight, so that we can hopefully not have, over time, fatigue with it, but just enough to give us something and to move on into the weekend and take with us to sort of close off the week. So last time, first of all, I think we have to note, just like I noted in the WhatsApp, I think it's unbelievable, literally unbelievable that, please God, 13 families are going to be blessed for Shabbos with the best gift that one could ever imagine. For Shabbos, please God, they should be well and healthy, and it should be the beginning of a flow of every single person who's returned. I think that it's a miracle. It's nothing short of a miracle. We saw what these people are capable of in terms of their destruction. I'm sure that many people thought that this would be impossible. I hope that the trauma that they've experienced during this time is miraculously over time healed, and just miraculously they're returned. And we should see this as the beginning of all of them, that please God come back. So what I thought we were going to share a little bit today is really a bit of a discussion or look through in terms of what we're processing now, and a way to view something that I think could empower us. If you think about it, I'll ask the question. Maybe we won't take the feedback, or you can throw it in the chat if you want. But if a person were to say, what's the most nerve-wracking or like difficult part of everything that's going on, that gives us the greatest anxiety? It could be anything from, obviously, the personal pain that people are feeling there and here. It could be, obviously, the fear that we're feeling over here. It could be a multitude of things. But one of the things that's interesting to think about is that if we knew, again, we're putting aside, we always have to put aside, we're not going to deal with the following: why do bad things happen to good people? It's not going to be a 15-minute discussion that we're going to have right now. But if we knew that tomorrow we would wake up and every single person was returned, and peace was restored, and we were in an eternal moment of just everything working out, and we could close down the army because we were certain, without a shadow of a doubt, that we would never require our young men and women, our young brothers and sisters, children, sons and daughters, to have to even be in the army. They could just sit there and do what they want to do, and we can all be in Israel together. If I knew that that would happen tomorrow, how would that change our experience of what we're experiencing right now? So that's one thing to keep in mind. And when I speak about that reality, if you remember, October 6th, which is a very innocuous date in Jewish history, and probably if you asked people what the greatest Jewish challenge of our people was on October 6th, people might say anything from, the Jewish people are so fractured, they're never going to come together again. Like, never. If you would have asked me on October 6th going into Yontiv, hey, Rafi, what do you think's going on in Israel? What's going to happen? I'll be like, honestly, I don't know. I don't see this ever getting better. That might have come out of my words. As a thinking person, as a believing person, I would have said somehow. But as a thinking person and a quote unquote logical person, I would have said, that's it. Like, there's going to be a civil war in Israel without a shadow of a doubt. And you're going to have two separate, teams for the rest of Israel's eternity. Or I might have said something like, what, the majority of Jews around the world they're just giving up on Israel. They couldn't care about it. They've moved on from Israel, from their Jewish identity, from being connected to our people. I think that both of those realities would be a very understandable reaction that we might have all had on October 6th. What if I would have told you on October 6th that in a day, you can have every single Jewish person come together as one, and in a day, you can have every single Jew who hardly remembers that they are Jewish, let alone wants to be Jewish, do a turnaround and stand together with Israel and the Jewish people with a beating heart like they've never had before. You would have said, probably, if you were a logical person, Rafi, that's a nice dream. But let's be real for a second. Now, again, we're not saying, oh, therefore all this happened because of that. We don't answer. I don't have a direct line to God down. We all have a line to God up, right? So we can all share our thoughts with him. He doesn't share us the whole thought process of everything. So none of this is saying, God forbid anyone should ever say it happened because of. I don't know why. None of us know why after 120. But I do know that the change that happened from October 6th to October 7th, the greatest threat facing the Jewish people, if I would have known that could all work out in a second, it would have been shocking. So we understand that in Jewish history, we face realities which in an instant change from the greatest of sadness to the greatest of miracles. Right? If one person were to be asked in the year of 1944, what do you think about the future of the Jewish people? I don't know if people would have said the words, you know what, just give us a couple of years and we'll have our own country and it'll be a superpower within, a couple of decades. And we'll all return there and there'll be more Jews in Israel than ever. And more like, you'd be like, you're out to lunch. You'd be more right to hear people if they were on the OTB, off track betting 1,000 to 1 against the Jewish people. Like there'd be no chance. You'd be like, Lipner, that's great, but the story's over. For 2,000 years we were in exile, and now it's not just exile, but it's like that's it. Like call in the chips and the game's over. And all you had, if you think about it, was like emuna and belief that, like, listen, ani mamin, like they sang going into the chambers, they said, I just believe that somehow we're going to get through this. So I think one of the most essential pieces that we have to realize when going through any challenge in Jewish history is that that challenge does not define who we are. It will not destroy who we are. It will refine, and somehow we will come through this even a better version of what we were beforehand. Right? How and why that works and what those pieces are. And we spoke about, last week, when we faced, and again, small C challenges. In fact, you can't even use the word challenge for what we faced 2 weeks ago. It's not even a challenge. It was a fun roller coaster. It wasn't so much fun in the middle of it, but it was a fun roller coaster in retrospect, right? We can't call that a challenge in today's day and age, right? But if we would have known, listen, at the end, this is how it's going to turn out, we'd have been like, okay, we're fine with the whole journey. Like the journey's fine. Like just hold on. This will land great. And we were okay. The problem was the uncertainty of things. So the big shift that Jews have from when you talk about emuna and belief that there's a bigger picture is you turn from a world of uncertainty to a world of certain what the end is going to be. You just don't know how or when it's going to happen. Right? So it's understandable for people who don't have that tethering to feel like, uh-oh, that's it. Like it's gonna, what's happening in Israel and then what's happening around the world, it is very unsettling because we don't know what tomorrow will bring. But if we know what the ultimate tomorrow will bring, because we've seen this throughout Jewish history, and like I might have said before, I'm not sure if I've said in this setting, the only reason why any of us are on this Zoom right now talking about, Jewish identity overcoming challenges is because each and every one of us come from a family that had, parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-great-grandparents who lived through destruction of temples, crusades, inquisitions, you name it. And most recently, the Holocaust. And when they could have said, that's it, I'm checking out, it's over, they said, no, I'm doubling down and I'm all in. And because of that decision, not everyone made that decision, right? And it's not a judgment. I don't know what decision I would make if I went through any serious trauma in my life related to my identity. It takes Herculean efforts, but you and I are here because of those types of people, because they made decisions throughout history for thousands of years, right? Where they said, you know what, I know the end of the story and I want me and my lineage to be part of that story. And I think that sometimes in that framing itself, there's a tremendous amount of strength that comes from that. Right? If you think about it on a low level, when a person's playing a team and they feel like there's no way we can win, the coach either says, listen, we've got a chance, or if they say, there's no chance, or they say, we've practiced for this, we've overcome greater before, we can do this. The mindset that goes in, not only for battling out there in the field, but for us to be in a space, to be able to do what we have to do to support Israel, be it through actions, through tzedakah, through prayer, through chesed, through going to Israel. If we know that that's the role we have to play in order to get through this, then we play the role, even though we don't know how it's going to end up in the end, in the immediate, but we know in the long term that'll happen. So I think that's one point that's extremely important to remember. All of Jewish history is based on the fact that on a dime, things can change. The story of Hanukkah, right, which is coming up. The Greeks were way outnumbering us, right? Rabim biad ma'atim, it says in the Alanisim that we're going to say. The many fell in the hands of the few. And the few weren't just a few. They weren't the Israeli army. They were a bunch of priests, right, who were sitting there and like, I don't know, studying in their yeshiva all day. And they're like, uh-oh, we got to fight to war, right? Like it wasn't like we were a mean, lean fighting machine. I think that sounds like a phrase I should have said if I was like 50, but I am 50, so I can say it, right? It's not that we were this great army. We weren't. But they just said, you know what? Jewish history says if we fight, we'll win. And they rededicate the entire temple. After Hanukkah, we're going to have Purim. It's the exact same thing. Even the truth is, if you look at Tu B'Shvat, which is going to be coming up in between those two, Tu B'Shvat, which is the holiday of trees, which is what we celebrate in the middle of the winter. Why do we do that, right? If you want to celebrate the blossoming of trees, right, you should have it when everything's in full bloom, right? So we say, no, 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 no. If you understand that planting seeds, even in the dead of winter, when it looks like nothing's going to happen and you think the game is over, and even if you look at the seed itself, right, we've all done those, or at least we've had kids, if we don't remember doing it ourselves, where you have that little plastic cup with the couple of little beans that you put in with some of the tissue paper and like toothpicks. I don't remember what the whole thing you put on the windowsill, and you watch what happens with the seed. So the whole point of that is you see the seed, it starts to get all disintegrated, falling apart. If you were to sit there and never have seen a seed before, you'd be like, that's it. The whole experiment's over. The seed's dying. And as the seed starts to get all yucky and fall apart, all of a sudden you see this beautiful green, fresh little sprout that comes out, and you realize that something even greater is about to be born, which otherwise would have been impossible, right? The whole nature of the system of the world that we live in is we see what's called in deeper teaching shvira, breaking. And when we use this word like tikkun olam, fixing, it's not the sense of like, like recycle or the ozone or like, it's not what it is. It means that ultimately when there's brokenness in a people, in a thing, in an item, it comes back together and it produces something that without breaking, it could have never produced this new reality, which is even more pure than it was beforehand. And if you think about that, and I just spoke, and I'll put it a little bit later on our WhatsApp chat to the trip as I update about the ambulance. I just spoke to Rafal Herbst, who I don't know his exact title. I met him about 6 years ago on an airplane. He's like he's one of the people who's in charge of deploying the ambulances. He's right now on the northern border. So he called me literally like a half an hour before this when he got phone reception, and we just touched base a little bit. I met him accidentally. I mean, by Yad Hashem, it was all nothing's coincidence. I was coming back on a flight from El Al, and one Rafi was sitting next to another Rafi, and we had 8 hours. We started talking, and we developed a very strong friendship. And who knew that, like, fast forward a couple of years, we'll be speaking about what we can do and where we can send things. And the first thing he said, as I'm sure anyone you've spoken to either in Israel or who have gone to Israel, is there's a certain feeling that everybody has, which again, nobody wants the reason why it started, but there's an undeniable fact that the Jewish people are in a very different place in togetherness and who we are than we were months ago, for months before that, and possibly really, to be honest, since almost the beginning of the state of Israel, the amount of togetherness that exists. Obviously, one of the challenges is we want that to maintain, right? So hopefully, please God, and you start to see this, and I think this is where our avoda and our work is. We know that everything gets forgotten very quickly, and you already start to see some of the talk about like, the political whatever, and like things merging in about whose sides and did they do the right thing or the wrong thing, which is naturally going to happen, right? And it's going to happen in our community as well, where you start to have people that start to, oh, well, this and that, and the togetherness that we feel has the potential for it to start to divide a little bit. But our goal is to find a way to maintain that. And we'll end with this one thought just to keep it on to our 15 minutes, because we have 2 minutes, right? You see this principle also by everything that exists in the way development happens. One of the most glaring examples that's given in some of the sources is when you teach a child to walk. If you want the child to learn how to walk, so what you do is you prop them up and you hold their hands, their little hands, and they sit there and they do the wobble, and you're like, well, this is awesome. Look, they're walking, right? They feel awesome. They're walking. Then you let go of their hands and they fall and they probably cry a little bit, right? And you're like, oh, so were they walking or were they not walking? So really they weren't walking, meaning if you let go and you can't walk, you're not walking. So what's the first stage? So the first stage is saying, how about I help show you what it's like to walk? Feel what it's like to be in that space. But ultimately, if you're a child learning to walk, you don't want, if you're the age of 20, to still have your parents holding your hand, because if you let go, they would fall, right? You're hoping eventually they become independent walkers on their own. And the whole goal of any experience on one level that we go through is we're given this ability, even charitable wise. People are like, wow, look at the great job. It's not, we're not doing a great job at like raising money. It's that when a Jew hurts and they feel their brothers and sisters in pain, you just say, how can I help? Right? That feeling of urgency goes away. Did we learn the midah of giving? That sense of urgency goes away. Did we lose the midah, the characteristic of achdus and togetherness? So even when there's not tragedy and we're walking down the street and we're coming out of cost Moscow and we see another fellow Jew that we've never met, we still feel that bond and say, hey, shalom, brother, sister, the way we would now when we feel that we want that. Because the whole goal is to move away the reasons that give us the sort of crutches through the pain to act a certain way and to realize that that's the way we were always meant to be as well. So just to recap, number one is the realization that Jewish history means that whatever we're facing is not the reality. It can change in a dime. We saw it change in one direction in a dime, and it can change back in the other direction in a dime as well. And if we know that, we don't get what's called yeush. We don't give up despair and hope. And the second piece is to realize that during this time, all these sort of wonderful feelings that we have because of this unfortunate situation, we want the unfortunate situation to go away and for us to retain and maintain all those things that grew from the brokenness that we had, which produced things inside of each and every one of us. I think each and every Jew as an individual, as well as our collective people as a community, both in Toronto and obviously around the world as well. So just the thoughts take us into the weekend to share around. We'll close the recording now, if that's okay. Not if that's okay, we can stop that. And want to say it's great. I really, honestly, I somehow walk away from this, at least personally, feeling very uplifted and empowered. So